Hello and welcome to another Leeds Food History Symposium video. Merry Christmas to everybody. Well, it's been quite a crazy year, hasn't it? This video is going to be a little bit different. It's a slideshow that I did for the virtual International Medieval Conference in Leeds, and that was another casualty of this year. They ended up going online rather than it being in person. We've been to the symposium. We've been to the Leeds International Medieval Conference for the last few years. They have a clubs and societies day on the Thursday when you can set up a stall and tell people about your group. And we've done that probably for the last 4 or 5 years. This year, with the IMC being cancelled or being put online, we were just invited to send just like a link to the website on there, and they will put a web page up. But what you could also do is to do a little slideshow if you wanted to and present that. And I did that on, I think it might have been the Wednesday actually, because they sort of scheduled them through the week. Anyway, so I thought I'll put this up on our website, on our YouTube channel, and it's really just a quick introduction to food history, particularly aimed at medieval historians, and then talking about the Leeds Symposium as well. So I will get on with it now. So first off, so the study of food history has been growing really for quite some time, and for a long time though it wasn't part of the mainstream of historical research, such that in the late 1990s the anthropologist Sidney Mintz, who was the author of a book called Sweetness and Power, which is a history of sugar, he wrote that food was such a powerful dimension of our consciousness as living things, to omit it from the study of human behaviour would be egregious. And his words were reflecting on the fact that for a long time the history of food and drink hadn't really played much part, but that at last it seemed to be gathering momentum and more people seemed to be studying it. Indeed, and shortly after his book was published, in 2001, the European Institute of Food History was founded. And that signified really sort of the growth of studies of food history. But it is still worth pointing out that a lot that gets written about food history comes from outside of university history departments. It comes from anthropologists, from literary scholars and archaeologists, to name but a few. And a lot also gets contributed by independent scholars who may have an in-depth knowledge on a particular specialist area. So it really is a truly multidisciplinary area of study. And there are a lot of areas to study in relation to food history. The provision of food obviously involves agriculture, fishing, hunting, and most people and communities in the medieval period, in fact into the early modern period as well, weren't self-sufficient. Most of the common staples that people consume needed to be processed, so you've got milling, baking, malting, brewing, as well as butchery. Most of the animals that were consumed for meat were generally bred by one farmer, by one group, and then be sold on to be fattened by another farmer, by butchers maybe, before then being sold on to the butchers, maybe moved around the country. Certainly in England they were. And many foodstuffs as well were traded not only within countries but between countries. So you've got things like wine and olive oil, spices, but also things that were fairly everyday items like saltfish, which were a staple for fast days in medieval periods, again through into the early modern period as well. So international trade is all part of this. You've got the actual cooking, the way food was prepared, and this is often traditionally what's thought of as food history, but it really is only just a part of the picture. It's only one aspect really to the overall history of food. How food was eaten, how people ate together, where they ate together, and also their overall diet. How well fed were people? What can we say about their calorific intake and vitamins? Was it enough for their lifestyle, their work? And indeed, how did they perceive it, the food that they were given, which starts to bring in more kind of general questions about culture and identity, which you can then break down by gender, by social status, or by region, and all of these different bits. Different people are interested in different parts of this, and it's what makes food history, I think, such a rich area for people to study, and why you get so many different people involved in it. Now, there is a growing body of work with such a broad field of inquiry, and you've got lots and lots of different books, and these are some of the ones that I particularly recommend on food and drink in medieval England. The first one is a collection of 19 essays by historians and archaeologists, edited by Woolgar, Sargentson and Waldron. And this really exemplifies this multidisciplinary approach to food history. You've got archaeologists, and historians in here, and all sorts of other people as well. The collection covers from the Anglo-Saxon period in England through to the late medieval, and it's divided into two parts. The first has essays on different foodstuffs, and the second has ones on overall diet and nutrition. The second book that I'd recommend is Chris Woolgar's The Culture of Food in England. But this doesn't just deal with the cultural aspects of food. It's more wide-ranging than that, and it's a study of food and diet at all levels of English society from 1200 to 1500. The third one is one by Peter Breers, someone who I know very well from the Leeds Symposium. Now, Peter spent a long time as a historical consultant, and he's helped on projects such as the restoration of the kitchens at Hampton Court, which gave rise to his book All the King's Cooks, on cooking and dining at Hampton Court at the time of Henry VIII. This book he distills his research on medieval kitchens and his experiences cooking in those settings with period recipes. It's very much hands-on, nuts and bolts history. It's like the sort of experimental archaeology. The fourth book I'd recommend is an older book, first published in 1993, but still available, Barbara Harvey's Living and Dying in England, which is about the lives of the monks at Westminster Abbey. Now, again, this is a book that really gets down to the nitty-gritty of medieval life. Harvey writes about the whole of monastic life, but the section on food is fantastic for its recreation of the diet of the monks in real detail. She estimates the size of the portions of bread, meat and fish, and the contribution that these things made to the diet of the community. And it's something that I particularly found useful when I was doing my own PhD on a 16th century gentry household. Now, as well as these, there are a couple more on specific foods, on staple foods that I think are great as well. There's Philip Slavin's Bread and Ale for the Brethren, which, like Harvey's book, is based on the documents from a religious community, this time the cathedral chapter at Norwich. And Slavin focuses on staples, bread and ale, but he's not just concerned with baking and brewing. He shows how the grain was grown on the surrounding estates in Norfolk, how it was stored in barns in various locations, the organisation of the transport, milling, malting, and he's helped by very detailed documents, admittedly, but he illustrates processes that must have been happening all over medieval England, and it really is kind of fascinating to see how the economy is organised around the production of this staple foods. And finally, Richard Unger's Beer in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance shows the importance of the staple drink of Northern Europe in economy and in people's nutrition. It shows how brewing developed with the introduction of hops to make a product that could be stored for longer and traded more easily. And this is a truly European story, not an English one, so it helps to put a reminder that the English experience is firmly rooted in a European context. Dutch beer and brewers flowed into England in the late Middle Ages, and changed English drinking habits forever. By the mid-16th century, England was a nation of beer drinkers, and the old-fashioned, unhopped ale was becoming very much a minority drink. So many publishers, many academic publishers have got books for sales covering aspects of food history. But there are a couple of places for people to go that specialise in producing books on food history. The first is a publisher, Prospect Books, founded in 1979 by Alan Davidson and owned from 1993 to 2014 by Tom Jane. Now owned by Marion Bowyer's Publishers, run by Catherine Kilgareth. Prospect specialise in many titles that might not otherwise see the light of day, and thus they perform a very valuable service to food historians. The other is a journal, Petit Propos Culinaire. This is closely associated with Prospect, and it was founded at the same time by Alan Davidson and passed to Tom Jane with Prospect. Tom still produces PPC, ably assisted by an international group of editing advisors, and this journal comes out 3 times a year, and you can find out more about PPC and subscribe to it from the link on the Prospect Books website. But as well as reading books, historians like to meet up for a chat with the like-minded folk, or we do when we could. Now, normal historians have conferences, food historians have symposiums. In England, there are 2 symposiums for food history. You have the Oxford Food Symposium, which was founded in 1979, the older and the grander of the 2. It's a multi-day event which deals with food in general rather than just food history, it has to be said. Quite expensive, but it is a really good experience. They also went online in 2020, like the IMC, and I think they are going to do. They may do so again in 2021. There's stuff on their website really to keep in touch with that. The papers from the Oxford Symposium are published by Prospect Books, so you can see past papers and read those. The other one is our own Leeds Symposium, founded in 1986 by a group of food historians based in Leeds. Chiefly Anne Wilson, who was the librarian at the Brotherton Library at the university. Peter Breers, who was then head of Leeds Museums and now, as said before, was an independent consultant. And they were later joined by Laura Mason, food writer, Ivan Day, another historical consultant, and Eileen White. Anne was for many years the organising force behind the symposium, but in recent years the job has fallen to a committee chaired by Laura and people like myself now who are on there as well. So our symposium is a little bit smaller than the Oxford one. We generally get around 100 people attending, and it's just a single day, usually on the middle Saturday in April, at which we have 5 or 6 speakers. Again, we had to cancel our symposium this year, and we're looking to go online next year to have like a virtual seminar series instead. A key feature of the symposium, when we can hold it in person, is our midday meal, where symposiasts are invited to bring a dish of food for 2 or 3 people, a salad, a savoury or a pudding, and everyone helps themselves to a bit of everything. It's really quite nice. There's also tea, cake and biscuits when the symposium finishes around 4 o'clock. Now, the symposium was originally held at the University of Leeds until 2002. However, new regulations then meant that the midday meal wouldn't have been allowed, and a symposium upped sticks to York, where it's been held ever since at the Friends Meeting House at Friargate, which is in the picture there. It's a decent sized venue for the number of people who come along, with a good sized main room with a lectern, audio and video equipment. And then we've got space in the entrance hall as well for Prospect Books, who attend every year. And also we have John Hudson regularly attending as well, who sells his replica pots. John's also somebody who goes to the IMC regularly too. There are kitchen facilities there, so we can cater for all the teas and coffees, and we've got places to store the food before we set it out. And then there's a separate room as well, which we use for laying out the lunchtime food. and even a terrace and garden at the back. When the weather permits, people can stand outside and eat. It's really quite pleasant sometimes in York in April, believe it or not. So there is the sort of there's the strange thing here. The Leeds Symposium is actually held in York now. So the papers from the early Leeds Symposia were published by Edinburgh University Press, and from 1994 to 96, those on cooking and dining in country houses were published by Sutton and sold by the National Trust. They obviously had a particular appeal there to sell those. And then for 10 years after that, the proceeds of the symposium, like those for Oxford, were published by Prospect. However, that arrangement ceased, and whilst individual papers have been published in PPC and elsewhere, there's been no collection, or there was no collection of papers published for around a decade. And this was one of the things that I wanted to try and help sort out when I was invited to join the organising committee about 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm glad to say that we have now self-published a collection of papers of domestic dairy in 2018. We worked with the printer Biddles, who did the typesetting and all the technical gubbins, and we edited the papers and put them together. And that's great, because that means that the hard work people put in producing the papers doesn't go to waste. They are getting published. They are getting published in a collection that then is made available. These can be purchased through the secretary, through our secretary, Leeds Symposium secretary, on our website, or also through ON Books, care of Colin Merriny at the University of Sheffield Archaeology Department. Colin regularly attends lots of sort of smaller archaeology and historical society gatherings, and such as Derbyshire Archaeology Day, which is how I met him. And he has a stock of our books as well. He also has a large stock of Prospect books too. So he does sell quite a few things on food history. We are working on some further collections of papers. Moulded foods, which we hope to have out probably in the next couple of months. We've got the papers in for another collection, pigs. Now this is another one, but both of those which are past symposia where we've gone out to the people who wrote them and we've collected them in. And then flavours, savours and sauces, which was the symposium, the last symposium we actually did in person in 2019, where we're going to get all those and hopefully again publish that in the new year, sometime in the new year, probably back end of the new year. So plenty to keep us busy in these troubled times. So our 2020 symposium, which was due to have happened, was to be ironically titled Food and Health, but that had to be cancelled. We are planning, as I say, to go online, deliver a seminar series, and it will be on that topic with basically the same speakers. 4 out of 5 of the speakers are going to do their papers virtually, and another couple have been added on as well. And I'll do a short update on that. There's an email gone out to all symposia to let them know and to give them an idea about the speakers and the titles of the papers. Look out for that. That'll be coming up the end of February and into March, and we'll be sending out a link on that. Best wishes to everybody. I'll put up a few links there for Prospect Books, for the Oxford Symposium, of the Leeds Food Symposium. Stay safe and thanks for listening. Bye.